You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Hello, thank you for joining us today. Today I'm with Lysa, who is a Director of Transformation at Sintra Payroll. Lysa, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
What is it in particular you'd like to know? Where will I start? I'm old, so I've probably got lots of things I could say.
Well, I think there's so much to start with that already. I think we can learn from anyone, regardless of their background or circumstance. And I never like to think old, I like to think wise. So thank you for coming on today and giving up your time. Actually, this is a very special Nurture Your Zest podcast, because today we're talking not only about the usual things we talk about, like curiosity, creativity, how people have overcome challenges or found their path, but we're also talking about life lessons and personal growth, personal development and MBAs. So you, like me, studied your MBA at Newcastle University.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is hugely inspiring for me, because a few weeks in now, I'm feeling so scared. There's so much reading to do. It's really intense and I'm loving it. But you know, time management's really important. Learning to work with people from other cultures and other backgrounds is really important. And I think it's definitely the start of a huge journey and adventure for me. So I'd like to know, first of all, how did you get into being a Director of Transformation? What does that mean?
That's a good question. I'm sure if you asked my boss, he couldn't answer it either. I have had probably an interesting journey to get here, because I think very much my life has been quite full of serendipity. I think it's really interesting to be able to choose where you want to go, but it's also really important, I believe, to always keep your options open and see what's in front of you and see where it leads you. So for me, working with Sintra was almost like such an amazing opportunity, such a chance that came along just at the right time. Having not long graduated from doing my executive MBA, which took 2 years on a part-time basis. At the time, I was running my own business. And sometimes life throws you these little curveballs that you don't expect. And I was married with 3 children, and then out of the blue, my husband informed me that my marriage was going to be no longer. So when you run your own business and doing what I do, working all over the place, actually that was a really, really tough time for me. And I was fortunate enough to have done some work for Sintra before as part of my business. And Carsten, anybody who's ever heard of Carsten Stair, if you haven't, you look him up, you'll never forget him. He hounded me, I think is probably a really good word, to persuade me to come and work for Sintra, because he wanted me to do for his organisation what I do with many organisations, which is help them grow, help them do whatever it is they do better, and also help all of their customers do what they do. So that, as I say, that almost serendipitous journey was, you couldn't have put something on my lap just at the right time that ended up being one of the best and most fulfilling things that I've ever done in my life. So I'm very much one of these people that I know it sounds like a cliche, you know, every cloud has a silver lining, but all of my life, everything I've ever done in life has been, no matter what gets thrown at you, there is always something you can learn from, and always somewhere very interesting it can take you.
Wow. I'm already inspired. I mean, I've been watching you from a distance. I know we've met a few times, and always wondered, you know, wanting to know more about you. But already, I mean, that sounds really tough, being in a situation where you're working really hard. And I get this as well. You know, I've been running my own business. I've been super busy. And actually, you can sometimes it can be difficult to make time for your relationships and your family and things like that. And getting that news out of the blue, being a mom, you know, having all of these different hats that you wear, that must have really hurt. So in that instance, I mean, how did you overcome that? Did you have any tools or strategies that you had in your toolkit that you could use to help? Or, you mentioned that you did have some things to kind of keep you busy at that time. And I guess throwing yourself into being busy can also be a strategy as well. But how did you overcome that?
Once again, I feel like I'm full of cliches today, but my whole journey, my whole life, from growing up in a single parent family on benefits in a council estate to becoming one of the UK's youngest non-executive female directors of a National Health Service, or PCT as it was called at the time, through to where I am today. None of it's been easy, and I think I've had so many challenges along the way, and I think the one thing that's been absolute consistent throughout all of those times, and as I say, it's cliche, is that absolute belief that there is something, there's everything, no matter how hard it is teaching us something, and there's a lesson to be learned. And I honestly believe, I made the joke about what do you want to know because I'm old. I don't really think I'm that old, although I'm 46, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will think I am. I don't necessarily believe that. I say that very much tongue-in-cheek, because all of those things that have happened to me that have been incredibly tough have got me to where I am today. And I'm genuinely grateful and feel like I'm the luckiest person alive. And I feel like I'm lucky because of probably some of the adversity and some of the challenges that I've faced, because I wouldn't be where I am now. So when you say, what are your strategies? I can honestly say it's that belief has been with me throughout. And it's not always easy to maintain that. Sometimes it's tough when things around you seem to be falling, but you keep hold of that. You find ways of keeping hold of that, and it carries you through. It really does.
It's so interesting you say that, because as you were talking about that, I'm thinking about something which I live my life by, which is the attitude of gratitude. And
right, yeah.
making time every day to say thank you to the universe, the world, to God, whoever you believe in, whether you're spiritual or not, but to say thank you for the wonderful things that have happened in your day. And sometimes it can be hard to find things, but there is always something. There is always someone who's come into your life or into your world, even for a few moments, that has impacted you in a way to feel grateful for.
Absolutely.
And just on that as well, I'm also thinking of, this is also going to sound like a cliche from my side, but something I've read many times, which is that whatever adversity you're going through, if you knew the blessing on the other side waiting for you, you would understand the challenge and the obstacle that you have to overcome now. And that is quite a cliche, but I've certainly found that as well, that we have these seasons and times, and actually things do happen for a reason, but they can be really difficult sometimes. One of the things you spoke about was being one of the youngest ever female non-executive directors, and I want to know more about that because I'm really interested in women in leadership. So as one of the youngest ever women in that situation, how old were you and what was your experience?
Gosh, I can't remember exactly how old I was. I was certainly in my mid-20s. I had been working at British Airways. I left school, got a job, been working at British Airways for many years, had 2 children, and got postnatal depression. And it was during that period that I have this belief, what can you do for yourself? It's tough, but what can you do to make a difference? Did some volunteering. And I ended up being approached to contribute to being a non-executive director of Newcastle PCT. Didn't have a degree. I lived in a council house at the time, single parent. I'm 5'1", short, blonde. I'm probably everything that everybody looks at and is stereotypically not anybody that they kind of go, oh, that this professional person could contribute something in this really important work. But still, the chair at the time, Gina Tiller, she was very unusual to have a female chair, but she was an absolute role model to me, an absolute hero. I loved the fact that she was a strong woman in business, and she faced quite a few challenges, I would imagine, in that role. And she was like a hero to me. And because she said she thought I could do it, I thought, I'll give it a shot. And I remember how tough that was. I remember going to a conference in Peterborough somewhere, and there was all these older gentlemen, very well-spoken, solicitors, all these different professions, and me. And they spent the entire time going, why are you here? What are your qualifications? I don't understand. How are you? How old are you? What qualifications do you have? What is your profession? And I was grilled from the moment I got there and the evening meal all the way through to the next day. And I felt so uncomfortable. It wasn't easy at all. It knocked my confidence. But I was really lucky to have another woman role model there. Gina was someone I could look up to and just put aside all of those other things and just think, whilst my self-esteem absolutely wasn't great and my self-worth wasn't great because I really felt like I didn't have a qualification. Who on earth am I to make a difference in this really important work? But I just kept hold of that belief that, this is tough, but I'm gonna go through it because I'm gonna learn from this, and it's gonna make me a stronger person. And all of these kind of, once again, strange experiences that just happened to me have given me the belief. You make sure you have the belief, no matter how small, and it will build. It will get bigger and bigger and bigger until it takes you goodness where. So for me, I would say that was a very challenging time, but one I look back on and once again go, I would never be where I was today if I hadn't persevered with that. I wasn't there very long, and I would never have done that if it wasn't for having another woman that I could really look up to and admire, who you could see in that role and have that really, really positive role model to look up to as well.
I love that story. I'm really, I can just imagine how you were explaining there about being in a venue or an event and kind of having to stamp your feet down and say, I'm here for a reason. I have the qualifications of people behind me to be here. And I think many women go through that. I certainly feel like that a lot of the time. I wonder if you feel a bit like I do, where if somebody tells me I can't do something, maybe I can't fit it in, or I haven't got enough time, or I'm not good enough yet, or I shouldn't apply for that job because who do I think I am? I find that a real motivator. I really like to push through that and prove my worth and prove them wrong. Do you find that?
I do, but I think probably and I do so much coaching with women and men in very senior positions. I think the biggest challenge isn't what other people tell us we can or we can't do. It's what we tell ourselves that we can or we can't do. And during that experience of being a non-exec, somebody actually said to me, you do realise you're the token person. You're the token female on the board. You're the token person from a council estate. And that was actually said to me at this conference by someone. And I wasn't particularly confident, but I said, good. Because you need representation, you need a different view. And maybe I won't have the same view as you, but hopefully I can come with something different that might just inform some decisions that will impact on people like me from council estates and so on and so forth. And so that time wasn't about those predominantly men, I've got to be honest with you, telling me what I couldn't do. It was that inner fight with me that I wasn't listening to that, and that I had to overcome what I believed about myself in order to continue through it, if that makes sense. And I think we ourselves are our own worst enemy, not necessarily the messages we get from other people.
Absolutely. You're so right. Actually, the listeners won't know because they can't see me, but my mouth was shocked, wide open at what you just said about someone saying that to you. I think sometimes the things that other people put onto you or say to you are more of a reflection of them and where they are at and their own views and perceptions and the way they see the world than sometimes about us. Yeah. And sometimes actually you have to start to filter out what sounds true and not.
Absolutely.
Actually, in our MBA at the moment, we're doing a lot of work around critical thinking and how to analyse pieces of evidence or academic material. One of the things I'm learning the most is that if you have no evidence, why would you believe that particular argument to be true? So it's really interesting chatting about this now, because I do think sometimes if we considered as individuals and especially with things like imposter syndrome and feeling stuck, what is the evidence for this thing that I'm thinking?
Sure.
I think that would really it would help me for sure.
I think I'd probably even want to give you a tip on that in terms of how to take that one step further, because what's really interesting is when we think about ourselves or others, or even when we, when we're doing our assignments and so forth, we say, what's the evidence? And we find it as humans, the way our brain works, we find it really difficult to differentiate between what we believe and facts, to differentiate between conceptual terms, such as you might believe the person is cross or upset or confident, these kind of conceptual words. But really, when we're looking for evidence, we need to be asking ourselves, what do we see? What do we hear? Not what we infer from what we see or from what we hear, not how we inadvertently judge that or interpret that, but what did I hear that person say or do? What did I see? Or I'll often say to students, if you're watching on a black and white old movie, silent movie, what can you see? Because a lot of the things that we think is evidence is not. It's how we take that sensory specific information and we interpret it through our own systems and give it meaning, and then we call that evidence. So to kind of really take that back, what did you hear? What did you see? And how are you interpreting that? Really stripping it back can be really useful.
Absolutely. And actually, just thinking about that, unconscious bias comes into it a lot. It really does. And I wonder, do you find that some of the people that you coach maybe struggle with or have perceptions of how people view them? And then when you talk about that and they start to look at those things, what did you hear? What did you see? That actually maybe their views about themselves or the way they're seen by people are actually not true? Do they start to grow into being more self-aware and self-confident?
It's a really tough journey. But if you do it in a really gentle way, and there are many times I can tell people that I work with what I'm observing, and if I do, I'll always say, I heard you say that, and I saw you do that. For me, that looked like you were upset. What was actually going on for you? Really separating the inference from the information. But what's really interesting is quite often in that coaching setting, when you actually go, can you tell me what I heard? Well, I saw somebody being cross with me. Okay, so tell me, what did you see that you're interpreting as being cross with you? And they'll go, well, I saw them put their pen down, I saw them do this. So how did you know that meant they were cross with you? And you just see that look as if to go, I don't. And then this big smile often comes over the face, because you realise this is what we do to ourselves all of the time. We're so tough on ourselves. And I can honestly say, in particular, I'm very passionate about women in leadership and women in business, full stop. And women are tough on themselves. My goodness. We are our own worst critics. And don't get me wrong, I coach men too, and they're exactly the same. But women tend to be so tough on themselves. So it's not my insight, it's given them the ability to have that insight themselves is one of the best things, one of my favourite things that I love to do, because having that, when you see that smile on somebody's face, it's almost like a weight's been lifted off their shoulder, because they see maybe that's not what really is going on at all. It's how they feel about it, not really what that person feels. So one of my favourite things to do. Oh,
I love that. I think that's really interesting, and I would want to know. I think we all do this. I know I do. I might assume somebody's cross, and actually that can sometimes make friction that wouldn't normally be there, and it can create problems in teams or organisations. So that's a really good tip for all of us to do. Another thing you mentioned there is how women can be really harsh or hard on themselves.
Yeah.
And when I think about that, I think about one of my personal inspirations, Professor Sharon Maven at Newcastle University Business School. Yeah. Sharon has done a lot of work in gender research around gender equality and women in leadership. And she's one of the reasons I wanted to do my MBA at Newcastle University, because one of my motivators is the fact that I'm afraid as a woman in the boardroom. Sometimes I make myself small, and I actually want to stop doing that, and I want to step into who I am. And I think another thing that holds me back is that I'm always told I'm nice. And, I want to be assertive, and I want people to take me seriously. But actually what I'm learning through my MBA already, or just through my own personal discovery, is that you can be nice but still authoritative.
Absolutely.
So you shouldn't necessarily give away the things that are your for me, working with people is my biggest strength. So to give that up would actually be inauthentic, and authenticity is very important to me. But one of the things that Sharon often says is that women are unkind to themselves, but they're also very unkind to each other. So she often talks about how the way that we perceive female leaders, we will look at their clothing, how much weight they've gained, often more than we would pick apart any other male leader. And it's interesting because if you look at Theresa May when she was still Prime Minister, there were often articles about her shoes and her clothing, and it just seems really silly that we do that. I wonder, have you ever experienced that where you've had women treat you in a way that you wouldn't expect, as in you are, wanting to help grow female leaders, and you've obviously had heroes who've really stood up and helped you to claim your own voice and kind of made a path for you, opened doors, and been supportive to you. Have you ever experienced women who haven't been helpful in that way?
Perhaps not in terms of how I dress and how I look, because let's face it, when you're saying you feel small in those environments, I am small. There's nothing I can do about that, I think how we present ourselves physically, how we feel internally will manifest itself in how we carry ourselves. And I think if you're particularly confident, that can bring out insecurities in other people. And I think, is it that women are more cruel to each other, or are women more likely to be insecure and therefore are more likely to pick up on things that bring out their own insecurities? I think, if anything, it's not been the way I look. I am plastered in makeup. I wear ridiculously high heels. I know for a fact all my career people have took one look at that and made a judgment. I kind of see that now as a little bit of my signature. That's who I am. Take me or leave me. I know I'll prove you wrong, in the sense that work with me, you'll get a different impression, and that kind of amuses me. If anything, going back to the MBA thing, where I experienced it most was not having a formal qualification. I think if there are any times when I was judged for not being as good as by other people, my peers, it was probably for not having the academic qualification for me to go on and, for example, do the kind of stuff that I've went on and done. So for me, that was one of the motivators. It was a very personal motivator for why I did the MBA. I was already running my own business of 10 years. I was already very successful. Didn't need that bit of paper to have that MBA to tell me I was successful or potentially even open doors. But I needed it for me, not for those other doubters, for me, because I knew from being a very early age that's what I wanted. My life circumstance meant I wasn't able to do that. I moved out home when I was 16. Had not the easiest of starts, so I had to get a job. And that was always something that I wanted. And I got it in my 40s. And I think, to me, that I knew I was always going to get it. I didn't care when, I didn't care how, but I knew I would do that qualification, and I would be doing it for me, not for the people who queried what my professional qualifications were. My academic ones, not so much my professional ones, my academic qualifications. I knew I was doing it for me because it would give me such great satisfaction. So a bit like what you said earlier, if people are like that, just spurs me on all the more. It makes me, I've gone on probably to achieve things that other people who had that qualification years before me, I've gone on to achieve some great things. It's all about the belief you have in yourself and understanding what are the things within you that are going to make you feel great, not for other people, but for yourself, to make you feel great so you can be the best you can be and achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve.
I love that. Thank you. Do you think for anybody listening, so you've spoken about how you didn't have the easiest start and coming from a council house background and leaving early at a young age, going through divorce and having some difficult circumstances, but particularly your early childhood and adulthood circumstances. How would you, what advice might you give to your younger version of yourself, if you could? I am very, very proud of where I've come from. I'm very proud of my roots. I'm very proud of all of the experiences I had along the way. But when you're that age, it's really hard. I went to a Catholic school in the area that I grew up from in Walker in Newcastle. And I wasn't really allowed to play out much. I wasn't really allowed to mix with other people. So they all thought we certainly weren't posh, but I was kind of a bit ostracised. And then I went to an all-girl Catholic school, and in the first year I got there, I got in the top class, and there were people from lots of much wealthier backgrounds. And I remember one particular girl coming to my house, and then she wasn't allowed to play with me again because of where I lived. So it was really odd. I mean, that they're very extreme experiences. Some of my best friends now are still my best friends from school, and I had a wonderful experience. But at a very young age, I experienced how not fitting in, how that can impact on you. But for me, it just made me want to be even more different. I was an odd-looking little child with crazy hair, had 36B boobs by the time I was 9. I just didn't fit in any category. And if I could give one message to myself, is to really be comfortable in your own skin, to value your own differences, and to use it to leverage those differences to get you to where you want to be. But once again, it's all about, it's so much easier said than done. It depends on what role models you've got around you to give you that encouragement. And unfortunately, not everybody has that. So you've got to find it from within. You've got to find it within yourself to be able to go, I'm going to make this work for me. And we look at the corporate world. What is it that we do with all of our organisations now? We ask them, what's your USP? What's your unique selling point? What makes you different from your competitor? If we can actually teach our kids that in school, that's a quality to be proud of, not one that actually ostracises you and makes you doubt your own self-worth and self-esteem. Imagine what a different place it would be if we taught our kids how priceless it is to actually be different. It would be amazing. That's so true. And it makes me think of something little girls are often told, don't be bossy, be quiet, be nice, all these things.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
You hear the other cliche, it's not cliche, but you hear very frequently actually tell them that they've got leadership skills, encourage that. And I think that's really important too.
Yeah.
Your career is you've been very busy in lots of different roles, but you also make time to do volunteering and give back to charitable organisations and, through other ways. I guess even like today, giving up your time to share your experience. So what does giving back mean to you?
It's something I've always done. I just remember, when I say I got postnatal depression, so I went and volunteered working with deprived families. There is something about finding joy in things. I mean, I love music, I love lots of things. But actually, this is going to sound probably quite selfish, but there's always somebody worse off than you. And when you really value that and you really understand that and you really do something to recognise that and help other people that are worse off than you, it actually quite selfishly makes you feel better yourself. And that might sound like a really selfish thing to say, but there's nothing gives me greater joy than, being able to help other people. I do all kinds of crazy stuff that some of my friends and colleagues go, what? You haven't got the time to do that? What are you doing that for? But, if that brings you personal joy and personal satisfaction that you are doing something to help someone else, then embrace it, go for it. And it's a win-win scenario then, isn't it? Everybody's a winner.
For sure. I love that. Okay. And I'm just thinking, what have you read in your life that has changed your way you think about things or think about yourself or the world, or even the way you interact with people in the corporate workspace? Do you have a book that you just love?
There's probably so many. Maybe it's worth not saying a book, but when I was working for British Airways many years ago in the early 90s, we were taught something called NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And I kind of didn't like it. It was taught to us in order to sell, and at the time I was really good at my job. I worked in a call centre, and I could sell quite well. But then there was this tool that was like really taught you how linguistics and how you phrase words and how you position things can really influence people. And I began to have a bit of a fascination with it, so that I ended up studying it, and then NLP became the foundation of probably who I am and everything that I do, whether I do it working one-to-one with people, whether I do it through my talks, through my business consultancy, whatever it is, my training, whatever it is that I do. Because the principles are really sound, and they're really caring, and they're really enable you to be curious, constantly not judging, constantly being open, constantly going, oh, why have I felt that way? Why am I interpreting that way? Why are they behaving that way? So NLP, there's a million books on NLP. That's not quite a book, but it's a thing, and it's probably the thing that absolutely changed my life. Another really important female role model to me was an American lady called Cricket Kemp, very unusual name. She ran an organisation called NLP Northeast, and her whole thing was just about helping people. So at the time, single parent, 2 kids, really struggling. She gave me a bursary to go on that course. That course changed my life. She changed my life. So not a book, but there are a million books, and that would be my absolute starting point. I think from an actual book perspective, although I could name millions of them, one that I would often recommend when I'm doing coaching is I recommend people to read Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I think it's a really, really valuable lesson that we can apply in our personal lives, our professional lives, our corporate lives, in terms of always understanding the motivations of why you do what you do and articulating those motivations, not just talking about how you're going to do something or what you're going to do. Really engage with people, really get on the same page with people by talking about what's important to you, your values, and the things that motivate you and drive you.
Wow. That's amazing. And also Simon Sinek is my favourite TEDx talk.
That's a great
the
talk.
Why one.
One of his first ones.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah.
I also I follow him on LinkedIn, and I find him very inspiring.
Absolutely.
Speaking of TEDx, you have yourself spoken on a TEDx stage.
Yeah.
And how, if any way, has that helped bring in more leads or credibility or new opportunities because you've been involved in that way?
Probably has. Credibility, very much so. But then again, I feel like an absolute fraud. Not imposter syndrome fraud, like a genuine fraud. Because when that happened, I was in the audience. It was the Beast from the East. 3 speakers, I think, or something like that, were prevented from travelling up to the conference. And I ended up doing it in me clothes dressed for a blizzard, with something like 10 minutes notice. So it's back. I said about these serendipitous moments. We talk about what is luck. I would say luck is preparedness meeting opportunity. Always being open to opportunity, always being prepared for whatever may happen. So when that opportunity presented itself completely out the blue, that preparedness was like, yeah, I can do this. Although I can't I remember shaking so much, and the nerves were there, and all of those things, all of those, oh my gosh, you can't do it, you're not good enough. That was all there, but never let it stop me. Never let it stop me. So I did it anyway. And Has it opened the doors? I don't know. I speak all over the place. I've just got back from Norway. I'm about to speak next month in Brussels, and then I'm speaking the week after in Bulgaria. I've just done a TEDx workshop for Newcastle. I was kind of doing some of that stuff already. Credibility is really important. I think it probably goes back to that woman thing. How do you convince people when you're a woman? And a lot of the world that I work in, it's predominantly men as well. But how do people judge you? How do people believe that you can do it when you plaster yourself in makeup like I do, and you've got your Geordie accent and all the rest of it? Those things help add some credibility to back up other people's belief that I can do it until they've met me or until they've seen me themselves. So that I will always be grateful, because my goodness, that what a fantastic thing to be able to say you've done. So back to that stuff I was saying before about you've got to be able to be open to opportunities. You've got to believe in yourself so that when those crazy things appear right in front of you, you can grab them with both hands, take them, because you've got no idea where that might lead.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking as well, it is funny how we perceive ourselves, because you've just said there that you were shaking when that opportunity came up and you had 10 minutes notice and you were dressed for a blizzard. Well, for me as an audience member, that day I loved. It was such an inspiring day. I learned so much about myself and you know, from the speakers. And I just remember that was my first interaction with TEDx. And I still have a Polaroid picture from that day, which they asked us to write down our dream. And mine was, the theme was, would you ever? Yeah. And mine was Dare to Dream. I wrote Dare to Dream, and it still sits at home on my kind of vision board, and it motivates me every day. And now I'm quite involved with TEDx, and I love that.
Excellent.
But actually looking at you on that day, that was my first ever time I'd ever seen you speak, or we didn't even interact or speak in any way. But for me, I was like, wow, this lady's so confident, you know. And you spoke about the train personality test.
Yeah.
And I was just, you know, completely, you captured my attention and held it. And so this is a prime example of how we perceive ourselves in a situation in one way. Absolutely. And someone else can have such a different view.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I often have this conversation with people because I'm a bit loud and gobby, and, you know, they'll say, oh my gosh, you're so confident. That's on outside. What happens on an inside isn't always what we give out on the outside. The trick is you make sure that your outer self reflects what you want people to see. And then it's such a strange phenomenon that what your brain therefore does is make your inner self feel how you're reflecting on the outside. And it's such a common psychological trick that actually makes all the difference in the world. How you hold yourself, no matter how you feel. I remember, I've never watched the video back, I can't bear, but somebody told me that I was talking about my left buttock shaking. I mean, how embarrassing was that? So you know, sometimes these things just come out your mouth when you're nervous, and you think to yourself, did I really say that? That's so embarrassing. But I remember, in all honesty, when I get nervous, the only part of my body that shakes is my left buttock. What that's about, I don't know, but it's probably all that adrenaline on the inside that you're hiding almost to be able to give out the right outer perception. And it manifests itself in strange ways. And when we talk about, I do a lot of coaching for public speaking and things like that, and people are like, oh, they let that physical internal feeling get in the way. And it's about learning to recognise it and love it. It's there, it's pumping you up to help you be the best you can be. Learning to work with it, even if it is your left buttock, like mine, you know, learning to work with it can really, really spur you on. But it's about how we really understand the relationship between what's happening internally with ourselves and what's happening externally, so we can make that whatever we want it to be, so we can be the best we want to be.
For sure. I'm just listening to that, feeling like I'm clicking with so much you're saying. Before we move on, I just wondered, do you feel, do you have much thoughts around the law of attraction? Because all of what you were saying there about kind of creating that person you want to be, and then your brain will be tricked into becoming that.
Sure.
what do you think about wider goals and kind of manifesting the life that you want? Have you ever used those types of techniques?
Somebody gave me the book The Secret many years ago. It was one of the first ones that really kind of brought the laws of attraction into the forefront and made it and popularised it. By then, I'd already undertaken my NLP journey, and I could probably see a lot of the similarities in the mantras, if you like, that if with the both. In some respect, for me, what that does is it's a fantastic metaphorical representation of how to be in the world. I don't believe that the universe puts checks through our door. I believe we do that. I believe it is all about belief, and it's belief that makes a difference, but it's about belief in what's possible, a belief in ourselves, belief in others. If we externalise that, in my view, and say that's down to the universe or whatever else, then we are also devolving responsibility. We're then saying that that's luck or that's something else external, when really it's us. We make that for ourselves. I think Louis Pasteur said, chance favours the prepared mind. Back to that stuff. What is luck? Is it really asking the universe, or is it really understanding yourself, others, and having such utter belief in that you'll make that stuff happen? So when those crazy opportunities like TEDx are there right in front of you, you've got the guts to take them. You've got the belief in yourself. And as I say, I was shaking like a leaf and I was terrified. Didn't stop me at all from doing it. And that's what I say, that law of attraction is more about your absolute internal belief that anything is possible if you set your mind to it, rather than the universe gifting you with whatever, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I'm glad you've shared your thoughts on that. I like to follow the law of attraction, but what you've said there gives some great tips on actually more about self-belief and making things happen for yourself. So we're running out of time, but I just want to ask before we go, what is the number one word for you that would sum up your life, your day, or the way you see the world, or kind of motivates you and gets you out of bed and helps you to nurture your zest? Okay,
so when my husband first left and I felt like my whole world fell apart, lost my business, thought I was going to lose my home, literally it was like one of those pulling the rug out of you moments. Because of what I do for a living, I thought, I can't do this to myself. I'm going to go and get some self-help books. And I don't know how many of those things that I bought, and none of them actually helped. So I wrote my own, and I didn't do it for any other purpose other than helping me. And I created these pages, and every day I didn't know what the page was going to be, and asked me questions, and there was that gratitude that was all built in. And one of the things in it was, who are you? I'm passionate about your identity, how you see yourself. Who do you want to be? When you achieve all of the things you want to achieve and you're the person you want to be, that's like what? And that's like what's a really interesting linguistic question that makes you look metaphorically at how you interpret your experience and so forth. And I came up with all this stuff. I want to be a strong woman. I want to be respected for what I do, blah, 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 blah. At the end of my little page, then was the question, and that's like what? And the first thing, I don't know why, but the first thing that came to my mind is Wonder Woman. With her, what do you call it, that whip thing of truth or whatever you call it. And that you can have that, there's the normal person during the day, and then she spins around and she's powerful and all of those things. And I drew a little picture of it, and I've carried it around with me ever since. So that word, that little reminder, that thing when times are tough, is this little metaphorical image that I've got, that it sounds really pathetic in a lot of ways. I'm certainly no Wonder Woman. You want to see the state of my house to answer that question. But find something that you take power from, or to take courage from, or whatever it is that you need in that moment in time. And for me, what I needed was strength. That strength to carry on, that strength to continue to achieve, that strength to do what I needed to do for my children, and to be able to identify with it in a really real way. So it's not one word, it's two, and mine is absolutely Wonder Woman.
Oh, wow. I love that. And the reason being, because Wonder Woman, she not only saves the world and she's strong and amazing, but she also advocates on behalf of others and helps people a lot. And that's something that you do also. So I think That's a beautiful word. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for coming on today.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest. If you've liked today, please subscribe. You can also leave us a review if you're feeling extra kind. Today's podcast has been made available through the kind sponsorship of TL Multimedia and That Branding Company. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.